Hey guys, David here. During my family's morning worship, we have been reading through the Desire of Ages for the past few months. One Bible story that stood out to me was about the Israelites' journey through the wilderness after being set free from captivity in Egypt. God had placed Joseph in Egypt when a famine was set to destroy the land. At Joseph's bidding, Jacob brought his whole household to Egypt to escape the effects of the famine. For the next 430 years, the Israelites lived in Egypt, and much of that time served as slaves to the Egyptians. Though the Israelites lived in Goshen, apart from the Egyptians, many generations were born in Egypt. They did not remember anything about living as a free people in a God-directed nation. And though they tried to keep their traditions, many pagan practices were incorporated into their worship and ways. When God brought the Israelites out of Egypt to go to the Promised Land, there were two routes he could have led them through. The first one was a direct route, which would have taken a very short time, about 3 days walking, and the second, a longer route, which ended up taking about 40 years to traverse. I wondered, why would God take them such a long way? In Patriarchs and Prophets, chapter 36, Ellen White says that the wilderness wandering was a result of the Israelites' rejection of God. Yet still, Deuteronomy 32 verse 10 says, "In the waste, howling wilderness, he led them about, he instructed them, he kept them as the apple of his eye." If they needed to eat, manna from heaven. If they needed to drink, water from a rock. When they wanted meat, flocks of quail. But notice, his provision for them was day by day. And I think that this is one of the most important lessons from this account. God provided manna each morning. It was to be collected to sustain the people for the whole day. Thinking you could gather extra for tomorrow and therefore not have to rely on God's provision for the next day, no, that did not work. Other than Friday, when they gathered enough for Friday and Sabbath, anything more than what was needed for that day spoiled. God was teaching them and us he is totally connected to our lives, and that we need to just trust him to know what we need for each day, and the needs of tomorrow are not today's. God is connected. He will take care of tomorrow when tomorrow comes. While what I have to share, of course, applies to all ages, I just want to directly talk to my peers. Having a personal, and I am stressing the word personal, relationship with God is a very important part of our life. It is so important that once you have your walk with God, the rest of your life will literally be changed. Obviously, I have not wandered in a wasteland for 40 years. I haven't even been alive for 40 years. But in the fairly recent past, I was very distant from God. So he had to bring me through a barren, empty, deserted, and dry place to get me reconnected. Just as the Israelites, sometimes we need a wilderness experience to reconnect with God. And this, teens, includes us. Perhaps some might wonder, why would I, as a now teen, who has grown up as an SDA, been very involved in church life, club activities, having parents who were involved with me, both in church and otherwise, not have a connection with God? That is a very good question, and one I've had to wrestle with over the past couple of years. The answer that I have is being surrounded by something and used to something all my life. Maybe there was just a false sense of security. Because my parents brought me to Sabbath school, prayed with me before bed and before a meal, brought me to church services and adventure or Pathfinder meetings, prayed for me and for others. Somehow, it just all blurred together in a corporate relationship with God, not a personal one. Also, there is an aspect of, we've heard it all before, over and over, and the impact of the Bible lessons aren't as strong. We aren't listening with the ears of, how does this apply to me right now, at this point in my life, because it is a story we've heard 1,000 times. Because we may only be half listening and not really seeing the relevance to us, we are not making a connection from the Bible to our situation. So the next logical question might be, what messages do young people growing up in church need to be hearing to get connected to God? That is also a really good question. I am not sure that there is that much that can be done about it. I mean, it's not like new Bible stories can be made up just to pique my interest. However, having at least some leaders who have built a relationship with the young people as they grow up, who can ask them what issues they are dealing with, and make sure to address those struggles in sermons, would keep young people from falling into the heard it already mode, and instead grab their attention. Much of the time we hear sermons, and it seems like they are targeted at the adults. We need to hear messages that also include relevance to our age group. Maybe we teens don't have what I just described in our church as an adults who have built close relationships with us. But take the initiative and speak up. Tell our pastors and our youth leaders what type of sermons we want to hear. And don't just give up after one try. Be persistent and keep on asking or telling them. It might take time, but it is your salvation we are talking about. Your connection with God, that is at stake. And this is related, but really this is on us. We should have frequent talks with our parents or a trusted adult about anything or everything. Get used to having talks with them now before some crisis situation, so we will be more comfortable to open up. When you find that you are struggling with an issue, you already have a connection with someone who can give you good and godly counsel or support. So, how can not having the connection God wants to establish affect us? Truthfully, for me, it opened up the door for Satan to attack because I didn't really have the security of God there with me. I lost a clear sense between right and wrong. I communicated less with my parents, withdrew into myself, and didn't really care too much about how other people felt. And I would just do things to make myself happier. Most of the time, I felt down and had a feeling of loneliness that is hard to explain. I felt my life had no purpose. I thought about how my preteen and early teen years would have been different if I had already established my own relationship with God. I think I would have been happier as a younger me. I also probably would have had more accomplishments and wouldn't have had a feeling in my heart that something was missing. I would have been more self-confident and would have been able to overcome temptations easier and been able to be more thoughtful to others around me. When Christ said to the tempter, "Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God," he repeated the words that more than 1,400 years before he had spoken to Israel. "The Lord thy God led thee these 40 years in the wilderness, and he humbled thee and suffered thee to hunger, and he fed thee with manna, which thou knewest not. Neither did thy fathers know, that he might make thee know that man doth not live by bread only, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of the Lord doth man live." That was found in Deuteronomy 8, verse 2 and 3. In the wilderness, when all means of sustenance failed, God sent his people manna from heaven, and a sufficient and constant supply was given. This provision was to teach them that while they trusted in God and walked in his ways, he would not forsake them. We, and I guess that really means everyone, but particularly us teens, can be hard-headed just as the Israelites in the wilderness. Jesus learned in 40 days what the Israelites learned in 40 years, to trust in God. Unlike today's society, which teaches that we can rely on ourselves, Jesus tells us to rely on God. During the lockdown of the pandemic, I finally came face to face with the realization that David, needed a closer walk with God. He was there, wanting to connect with me. I just needed to plug in and connect with him. The first decision I made was to read through the whole Bible, which I had never done before. When I first started, it was tough to even read for 5 minutes, but gradually the 5 minutes grew to 10 minutes and then grew to include various books. Books that encouraged me or were targeted to a specific need. My personal time has grown so much, my parents usually have to call me to come out for family worship. You might be asking yourself, is connecting with God really going to change my life? I will ask you, did it make a difference to the Israelites? Did trusting in God make a difference to them? If you remember, when they trusted in God, they were taken care of. Their needs were met, and they were able to enter the promised land. For me, it brought a calm to my life. It filled a void, and I had no need to seek fulfillment elsewhere. I began to enjoy the simple things in life more. Instead of feeling my life has no purpose, I realized my life has promise and purpose, which God is showing me day by day. He's waiting to connect with you. All you have to do is make a start, and you will find He is right there, waiting to supply all of your needs and bring you to the promised land.